If we are sort of living in a little suburb of the galaxy, can you foresee a time when we need to get out of the suburb and colonize somewhere else because of the gradual curve towards the end?
Well, I think the human race, if it survives the next few years, will go on to colonize first the solar system and then to send ships out to the stars and ultimately perhaps to other galaxies. But if the expansion of the universe is fast enough, we will never be able to keep up with it.
Now, one fascinating aspect that is raised is the question of time itself in the book. Now, we all think that we know what time is. It's a relentless march forward. But for the purposes of your argument, Stephen Hawking, you use a mathematical concept that you call imaginary time, which seems to be able to run backwards as well as forwards.
In our theories, there are two kinds of time. There is what is called real time. This is a kind of time that is measured by a clock. The time that we feel passing, the time in which we grow older. Then there is imaginary time. Of course, imaginary time is an idea that science fiction writers, like Arthur, have used in their stories. But imaginary time is also a well-defined mathematical concept. It can be thought of as a direction of time that is at right angles to ordinary, real time, in a certain sense. The universe has a beginning in real time, at the Big Bang. And it may well have an end if it collapses to a big crunch. But in imaginary time, it has no beginning or end. Rather, imaginary time is closed in on itself, like the surface of the Earth. The surface of the Earth doesn't have any beginning or end. I know, because I have been round the world, and I didn't fall off. Individual particles can travel through imaginary time and arrive back at an earlier real time. But I don't believe that people will ever be able to travel back in time, like in the film, Back to the Future.
I'm going to come first, if I may, to you, Carl Sagan, because this idea in Professor Hawking's book, this extraordinary four-dimensional model of the universe with no boundaries, but finite, just like the Earth. This, to me, is really stretching my own capacity for imagination to the utmost. How would you turn it into words for me, a layman?
Well, the first thing I would say is not to feel bad if it's not immediately intuitively obvious. Our ability to understand things instantly, so-called common sense, derives from a certain range of size and speed and duration that are appropriate for human existence. We know about things from a tenth of a millimeter to a few kilometers, from a fraction of a second to a lifetime, and so on. So when we are dealing with matters of quantum physics, where particles have a size of 10 to the minus 13th centimeters, or in cosmology, where we are talking about 10 billion light years or more, it is very reasonable that our intuition is not adequate to the task. One point I'd like to make about this is that every human culture has a set of creation myths, but they're in the realm of mythology or religion or folklore, and they are, of course, all mutually inconsistent. The great thing that is happening in our time is that we are able, through a method which can actually make some progress towards the real universe out there, to find out something about origins, and this is the scientific method applied to the science of cosmology. So I know that's not a direct answer to your question, but I thought it was more important to address the issue of feeling unhappy because it wasn't immediately understandable.
Well, yes, I find that extremely soothing, actually, because it is a kind of sort of formidable task of grasping this that makes me want to retreat into trivial questions like, is this idea of predicting backwards going to put astrologers out of business?
Nothing will put astrologers out of business.
Well,
Alas.
well, that certainly added a touch of lightness to these tremendous issues that we are discussing: infinity, black holes, and imaginary time. And at this stage, let's relax a little bit and have a bit of fun with mathematics at their most abstruse. I'm going to ask Arthur Clarke here to do some doodling with his computer and with a fascinating exercise with complex numbers, which is called the Mandelbrot set. Now, this is named in honor of a French scientist working for IBM. It's a mathematical equation which leads us towards the infinite. In effect, it makes the mathematics of the universe visual and incredibly beautiful. This is what we would see if we had eyes to see it when order meets chaos. This is what's going on in the universe every day. An ordered universe is breaking down and becoming more disordered. This is the second law of thermodynamics in action, what Stephen Hawking calls Murphy's Law. Now, Dr. Clarke, you've been using your computer back home in Sri Lanka to explore the Mandelbrot set at incredibly high magnifications. Over to you, sir.
Yes, well, this strange-looking object is the Mandelbrot set, which actually is extraordinarily simple in concept. It's defined by an equation of just two terms, z squared plus c. That's all there is to it. Yeah, that simple equation, z squared or z squared plus c, you feed a number into it, then carry on over and over again, sort of cranking the number back round and round, and then plot the result on the screen. So I won't go into details, but this is the first appearance of this set. And what it does, it divides all possible numbers into two categories. It's really a map or a boundary or a fence, if you like, dividing one class of numbers from another. And you can tell your computer to go into any spot here and say, recompute that area to a higher degree of precision, and then blow it up on the screen. So you can use the computer as a microscope, and you can continue that process forever. Some of the images are incredibly beautiful and are going to have a great impact on artistic design in the next decade or so. I found what looked like black holes, and I'd like to show them to you. So what I'm going to do now, essentially, is to zoom into it, increasing the magnification manyfold, and if I press the right button, it should happen now. The computer will now give you this image, and I think you'll agree when it comes up, it's a very impressive black hole. And it'll be even more so when I start it into action.
Oh yes, it is magnificent, isn't it?
You ain't seen nothing yet. I should explain that this magnification, you remember the original picture which it took about the same area, this time I've magnified it about 1,000 times. So the picture you saw first is now 500 feet across. Now let's see if this works. Now, isn't that lovely? So there is matter streaming into this black hole. Well, now, when I found this black hole, I started exploring the neighborhood, and I very quickly found another.
Indeed.
Now this...
That's lovely.
Now this is the second black hole. Now it looks just like the earlier one, but this is on a far greater magnification. The original Mandelbrot set now is, I think, about 10 million miles wide. This is enormously bigger than the first one you saw, yet essentially it's the same kind of pattern. This is black hole number 3, and this one took me 22 hours of computing the day before I left Sri Lanka. I had the computer running all night, and I'm rather proud of this one because on this scale, that original little picture you saw is the width of the orbit of Mars. So you understand that no human being has ever seen that particular pattern before, simply because of probabilities. And you can explore the Mandelbrot set by blowing up bits and pieces of it, and you're pretty sure that no one's ever seen that. You're the first person to see it.
And each time you're being drawn towards...
You're being sucked into it.
Mathematical infinity.
Into smaller, and yes, this is real mathematical infinity. This goes on forever and ever, limited only by the capacity of your machine and the speed with which it can do its calculations. I am doing calculations here. You may not be able to see that enormously long number, the 20-digit numbers or so, and the machine is multiplying those together hundreds of times a second. Now, the thing that fascinates me about this is that it is infinite in detail. You can go on forever and ever. Now, I would like to ask Stephen this question. Is the real universe also infinite in detail? I mean, we know we have molecules, atoms, electrons, protons, subatomic, right down to the quarks so far. But does it continue forever and ever? Or is there a limit? Is there a basement to the real universe?
Professor Hawking.
We will discover new structures when look at the universe on smaller and smaller scales. But in the case of the universe, there seems to be a limiting scale. It is called the Planck length, and it's about 1,000,000 billion times smaller than an inch. This means that there is a limit to how complex the universe can be. It also means that the universe could be described by a theory that is fairly simple, at least on scales of the Planck length. I just hope that we are smart enough to find it.
Are we smart enough to find it, Arthur?
Well, I wonder, because after all, we're still pretty primitive organisms, and the universe is very old. And I just don't know. I would like to think so, but then there's a feeling, when we found it, then what? Where do we go from here?
And that was right at the beginning of DVRs.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of DVRs. Did you ever do the DVR thing?
Like copying stuff?
No. Like on your TV, you could program it to save, not digitally save. Like your cable would feed into the DVR, and you could stop all the commercials and speed up and slow down the TV.
No, I never had that. But I heard about that, and then they got rid of them.
No, they're still out.
that-
They're still out. They're still popular in the States, but it was a fad that began from 2002 to 2006.
Okay.
And then the new PlayStation 2s and Xbox 3s came out. That's what killed the DVRs.
Okay. I read when I heard that they were going to make the Contact movie. Like, this is...
With Jodie Foster?
Yeah, 20 years ago. For whatever reason, I got really triggered to read that book, because I knew this girl at the time, and her father had all the Carl Sagan books and stuff. So
Yeah, that's a Carl Sagan book.
Yeah, so I read that, and how there's that protagonist that's the billionaire, that in the book, all right? It was very interesting, because he talked about this technology that, and I'd have to really reread it, because I was pretty non-awakened then, but talked about this technology that you could watch TV without the ads, and it was so successful that he got blacklisted, because it was like, I don't think it had anything conspiratorial like the stuff that was inlaid in ads and stuff, but it made ads obsolete, so people didn't have to watch ads. And I guess like when Carl wrote the book, it was really so ahead of its time, because it was like and it really reminded me of that sort of technology, like, because it sort of came about. And I remember there was some stuff that was so good in the States that it just got like, I don't know if it was TiVo or something, but it was like that.
Stuff. TiVo, and then it was replaced by the common word DVR, where TiVo's got, everyone made their own version of it. I wonder what year Contact came out with Carl Sagan as a book. $1985.
Yeah.
This makes sense. So, if you were to look at television, it is the early 1980s that cable made it global. In the 70s and the 60s, it was around, but it was small then. And they deregulated it, and they allowed thousands of small cable companies to open up and start stringing lines. And they made a deal with all of the telephone companies who had already been broken up 20 years early under an antitrust lawsuit to allow cable lines to go in. And ads were so annoying in the 80s. They were like 40 seconds long then. And you'd get 6, 7, or 8 of them. So you could go 4 to 5 minutes, and sometimes 6 minutes, on a 30-minute TV show twice. So 8 minutes, 10 minutes of ads. Yeah. And cable came out, no commercials. And, it came out in 85, so 83 is when, that's when MTV would have been done. So what year was MTV founded? Let me find out.
I think 83, because I remember, like, Dire Straits. What's their song? I Want My MTV. That's
my MTV, yeah. Get my chicks for free. Fuel.
No.
That was the name.
Oh, that was the album, but the song.
I don't remember.
I can't believe I can't remember Dire Straits. Let me find it. Because that was really around the time of...
On Saturday, August 1st, 1981, 12 a.m. Eastern Time, MTV launched with the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," spoken by John Lack, and played over footage of the first space shuttle launch countdown of Columbia, which took place earlier that year at the end of Apollo 11. So, Dire Straits.
I'm looking. I can't believe I forget this song. It was like, I love Dire Straits.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm on their wiki.
I'm there too. Not money for nothing. Because basically that song was like the first real video, and like Michael Jackson, like Thriller, it was around that time where the MTV in the videos, like, again, Michael Jackson, Thriller, like, really, he put effort into his videos. But these things are talking about a massive reality shift concepts, Like, just the thought that you could actually have an opportunity that you didn't have to listen to ads, It was just an accepted meme. So it was like, the changes feel really subtle now, but they were massive at the time. I can't believe I forget that song.
I thought it was Fuel. Let me look. Fuel.
Yeah, Money for Nothing. Money for Nothing.
Yeah. There we go.
It's Money for Nothing.
It's Money for
Nothing. Yeah, I don't know why I don't remember that, because I love, But yeah, that was like, came out in, 85.
Yeah, 85. because that's when it was on the charts for 228 weeks.
Yeah, it was like, pretty close to like Pink Floyd sort of stuff. Nowhere near Pink. It's like you comparing yourself to any other psychic. It's like, but they did really well, like they were just like that genre of sort of big band, sort of like with all instruments, and they got a saxophone, mate. I love their sax. Like the player was like phenomenal.
Because I was playing the sax then.
Yeah, you've mentioned that. So I mean, like bands like In Excess, like
I saw them. Yeah.
But the saxophone always added so much more. It just added a different. You can have all different melodies because it's a unique frequency, but it harmonizes with all the other instruments so well. Like you get a really good player,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like the MTV time, that was a really good shift.
Yeah. Did you get cable right away?
No, we had nothing like that here, mate. Nothing. We didn't get any sort of cable until like the mid-90s.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Like we only had like 5 channels. Like
wow.
For like 30 years, if that.
So my parents, by the 80s, we still had black and white TV. They refused to upgrade. I remember going to my grandmother's house to watch a color TV. They were super expensive in the 60s and the 70s, so people got them, they would last 20 years.
Yeah.
So
up until like maybe
in 1980, we got a color TV, but we didn't get cable into the 90s. Even though we could have got cable in the 80s, in the mid 80s, when and MTV was starting.
So it was like, but for you over in America, where the option was there, it was like a decade later, sort of thing.
Yeah. And then we got cable and a VCR because everything came cheap then. Everything just literally cheap.
Yeah.
I remember VCRs being like $1,200 in the 80s.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then by the 90s, they were down to like $145 or $200.
You know what I was thinking, right? Like, say we're doing documentaries and videos and stuff, and the idea I had of you like getting a few minute clips of your your conference. It was like I was reflecting on like all this era that we're talking about, and my brother and I, we used to hire videos from a video shop so much. Like it used to be a thing, like say on a Saturday night to go and get a movie each. And
same here, yeah. There were video shops everywhere, and then all of a sudden they all went out of business.
Yeah, but the thing was, like on VCR, or like, they used to have the tape, like movies, but they would have the previews at the start, like 3 or 4 previews of other movies. Did you ever?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like on the videos, they used to have like previews of other movies that are out, like trailers, the trailers of other movies, and so it was like I remember that era because it was such a thing to, you talk about searching in YouTube or like on IMDb now, and you get all the options of
right. That didn't exist back then, exactly.
Yeah. So actually, like just how pivotal those little trailers were of other movies that were being released, because a lot of them didn't get to the big screen, and you'd never know about them.
You'd never know, exactly.
And then, it's like going into a record store and randomly like choosing out a whole pile and finding stuff that you didn't know you were looking for, or a bookstore. Yeah. It was like in that era there was the opportunity to find stuff by randomness, by simple means like that, but there was no other real way of it being like without the effort of actually going to a place, like when we look on the internet where things might pop up and it's like, I'll go there, I'll search that. So yeah, I was just thinking about that,
so we got, when did we get our real first search engine for an internet?
Well, I was buying, like, the thing with me with the IT stuff, it came by searching records on the internet in the 90s. And I was buying records like mid-90s via the internet when there was no real structure, like the infrastructure. So I was using Yahoo and Alta Vista a lot. And they were probably the second half of the 90s. Because I don't know if you've ever watched a show called *Halt and Catch Fire*. Have you heard of that at all?
I haven't.
You know what that is? That's like in the 80s, like IT savvy, like geeks getting together and changing the world. A bit like how Microsoft got organically formed by kids.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It is like all the dramas of the 80s and all the like, you know, relationship sort of stuff. It's like a bit like drama on that level, but there's a theme of, say, creating the new PC. Or then there's a theme of creating, you know, software. And they've just finished the third season, and the next one is like the theme that they've planted is the World Wide Web. And so it's like the key is like the web is actually, it's set in the 80s and stuff. It's brilliant, mate. You'd actually really enjoy it.
Yeah. When did it come out? It was set in the 80s, but what year did it actually come out?
I think it's 2014, 2 years ago.
So,
it's got Lee Pace. Lee Pace was like, if you know who Lee Pace is, he's been in like Lord of the Rings, The Last Group and stuff.
Yeah. So the brain drain, you know, when they're talking, you know, what you're just talking about is they needed geeks fast. That was the brain drain. They needed geeks fast.
Yeah. It's brilliant cast, mate. It's like, it's only short series. Like the whole first season is about them building a PC from nothing. And the different characters and wanting to market it and push it and money and all that sort of stuff, you know. But it's set in the 80s and it's like, I remember the thing that really got me into computers and IT was I read a Rolling Stone magazine just in the library of like the campus I was studying at. And I'm not really that much of a fan of Steve Jobs and that. Like, I'm not that. He's like a godlike character or, you know, but the Rolling Stone article described how a group of kids got together and they thought about creating a world in a different way. And the whole, like, creative setting that they offered, which was really, like, conducive to, like, exploration of ideas and stuff. It was so original. I saw the brilliance of it. It wasn't like a challenge to society sort of thing. It was like, you know, there was an opportunity and they saw it and they got together and sort of changed the world. And I like that, you know, that belief in themselves and stuff. And I read that article and it was like, yeah, I mean, look at what they visioned and then they created. You know, it was like, obviously it was real tough to go against the whole IBM and stuff, like those sort of massive organisations. But I read that and I was really inspired because, you know, the early 90s was when, or the mid 90s was when really connected.
All the shit. I remember. We got cell phones. They went from bricks to the StarTech.
Yeah.
That was actually a good phone. And then Nextel came out with that CB kind of thing, so you didn't actually have to use the actual telephone system. You could, you know, direct connect via CB type thing within their own network, and all the construction companies love that stuff. And then pagers disappeared.
Well, the interesting thing in Australia is we were on analog mobiles for very long, and they actually did a big switch to digital, and it was like, it sucked. Because it was just the tech. It was like going from DC power to AC power. You know, it's like you know, Tesla knew what it was, and Edison was like trying to convert everyone to his will. So, but yeah, it just got implemented, and then it went backwards here.
That's kind of what it did over here too. because there were some areas that nobody's cell phones worked ever.
Yeah, that was a theme that I got from the US. Like, there was always like dropouts. You know, that a lot of the shows are always like no coverage sort of thing. Like, you know, at moments of extreme pressure, the mobile phone coverage doesn't work. You know, add to the intensity of the moment. You know, it's like, oh damn, you know, I've got to save the world and I can't reach like my friend. You know,
and to think, time the military had, 100 years beyond that.
Yeah. Encryption and all sorts of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But it was very much an interesting time. Like, and getting back to the Carl Sagan book, like you're saying, like the time that he sort of wrote that, it was like, obviously on many levels he was aware of a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but the book was very, very engaging. Like, it was very, very entertaining. Like, I just could not put it down. And, you know, in the movie, they don't go into the vision of the rich, like, guy that was looking out for Jodie. But in the book, it's very, very covered, that person. And that, you know, that relationship that the Jodie character had with him. Yeah, the book is fantastic.
You know, I think I started reading the book right after the movie came out. I know my brother read it, and I kept picking it up and putting it down and picking it up and putting it down.
I actually, for once, read something before the movie. I actually really, made an effort to read it.
So I growing up, when I saw Carl Sagan, he looked like a goof to me. And I couldn't take him seriously. I mean, I was way younger than everyone, and they would always watch that stuff, and I didn't want to watch it. And he just looked like a goof to me.
Yeah.
You know, and he'd be on, and then what would be before it? Different Strokes.
Who you talking about, Willis?
Yeah, exactly. What you talking about? And then it would be on. He would come on, and then I think they'd make me go to bed or something like that. I mean, I've seen videos and stuff, and he does look like a goof.
Yeah.
But again, you know, I didn't, you know, you don't understand those times. You know, that was what everyone looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was before the whole pruning of the society.
Yeah.
And take the hedge cutters to everything.
Yeah. Him talking about like a movie like Contact was actually now I review it was very much against on many levels what he was about. He was shutting a lot of that stuff down, you know. I mean, I like Michael Zazarian. He talks about there was a scientist that went against the mainstream that talked about catastrophes, you know. And Carl Sagan went on a mission to actually destroy it and discredit this guy from the behind the scenes, the academic level. And Michael, I love him because he's just he obviously tunes into the being, and he admires courage to speak the truth, you know. Even if it may not be right, that courage can go against, you know, the flow of falseness. And he gets pretty passionate being the Irishman. I talked about George Lente, going against the Banks, but Michael, he's got that Irish sort of, you know, brawling energy. You know, I think
he's a laughter.
Yeah. But, Valerie, what's his name? But it's just interesting because, I mean, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. Carl had there's a really good interview with him and Arthur C. Clarke. Because you mentioned Arthur C. Clarke in...
I might have seen that because I did like watching Arthur C. Clarke. I did like watching that stuff.
Like Arthur C. Clarke did like a
Anyway, those guys are all CIA. You do realize that, right?
they had to be.
Yeah.
It's a bit
They
like
public plants. They were what controlled, everything.
yeah, control
But
position.
I want to bring up the brain drain again. As many as 200 million people were drained out of the world. Okay? And not once, like 3 times.
You mean from, like, say, IT geeks? Like,
Yeah.
in the 80s, like, it obviously identified a lot of people, and then they were harvested in a way that they went into the black stuff.
Right. 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Mm.
Okay?
So it was like a harvest. Harvest is...
Yeah. Well, a harvest, but essentially they're going from high school, a little bit of college, but they're all highly intelligent, motivated workforces, etc., willing to sign long-term things, working XXX, in the military,
Yeah.
lots of research, and then they get over there, and the military itself is so corrupt and abusive, it's pretty much slave labor.
It's a trap, yeah.
Yeah, total trap.
Because it's like the whole, well, we can't tell you what we're doing, but you get looked after, blah, blah, blah. But then once you sign that dotted line, it's a commitment that you can't get out of.
Yeah, you can't get out.
I like the New Zealand guy, what's his name? Bruce Cathy. Because I put his clips in quite a few times. And he talks in a video called The Harmonic Code that this guy in Adelaide actually did. And I put a clip up about him and he copyrighted me. But he talks about how he was offered the avenue to go into all that stuff, and his like discernment was like, it was like it had to be done in a very rite of passage, free will way. Like you talk about how you can't coerce people; they have to like choose it, whether it's going off world and stuff. And it was perfectly sort of expressed by Bruce in that video, because he had, he worked out a lot of stuff, and it's out in the public, and it's like not meant for public, and the CIA were trying to encourage him to join and to the fold, and he was like, no, I don't think I want to. And he actually asked the question of the guy, like, because it was like a verbal sort of commitment, and once he went down that path, it was like the free will sort of choice, And he goes to the guy, he goes, look, if you knew now what you knew now, would you sign this? And he goes, no. The actual CIA guy said, no, I wouldn't. And he obviously had good intuition, and he was like, something's not right here,
Yeah.
And I really respect him, because he went that hard road in the reality, going against the grain, but he stayed free, probably like the whole karma thing as well, you know what I mean? So it's like, I get what you're saying. It's like, it's so much like there aren't the offerings in the public to give an alternative, whereas there are now, So I appreciate it's the colloquial now, sort of what was there,
So 600 million people in 30 years. Okay. That also included, cows, chickens, food. The mass supply, all of that, to be able to make it. So they needed the Cold War to do that.
Cold War cover, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of volume of that sort of talent being removed from society, and what was the potential of the society with that in it, It's all like, well, let's put some let's pull the reins of the industrial era, you know. How are we gonna hold it back, you know? Or let's just take a whole group of people and employ them in what we want them to.
The brain drain. Well, as soon as those people became off-worlders, their spiritual contracts changed. They became third density roaming entities. And you've heard me say galactic free roaming entities or things like that. These are just the local free roaming entities. So their physics has now changed and scaled because they're not in the same bubble of Earth in the disunity physics they're using.
Yeah.
Now, some of them were portaled there under concepts there is an emergency on Mars and we have the special technology and we need immediate people there to build this, and this. And then they got there and they built for 5 years and then the next group came and they never got to go back. Yeah.
It's like, it's the compartmentalization, mate. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You know, like putting in people just enough to get them to what they want to do, and then, you know, it's actually a conditional thing.
Right. And if they can keep some semblance of order at all, you know, all they do is keep sending more and more and more and more and more and more people.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is a bit like, you know, we've mentioned The Expanse, the new TV show, where it's like...
I enjoyed that one.
Because it's like set in a couple hundred years' time with Mars, Earth, and the asteroid belt, where there's like water is the most precious thing in the solar system.
Yeah.
And it's all the cultural issues with that. Because the hierarchical order, like Earth sees itself as number one. Mars is like, they appreciate everything on the planet because people on Earth, like, just, it's overpopulated and they've destroyed the beauty of it. And
I beg to differ. It's not overpopulated. It's underpopulated.
In that series.
No. In I'm saying in the way it is now, the Earth can hold a lot more life.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that, like,
it's just dirty laundry water right now.
Yeah.
As soon as the water back on the planet that they took away, things get good really fast.
Yeah. But yeah, that series is like, it's like generations on from what you're saying.
Yep.
And
there was another series, I forgot what it was, but it was what we were just talking about, the brain drain. And they told everyone, it was that they boarded a ship in the 60s. I have to look into some dumb name. Ascension. Ascension.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
They that was only a few episodes, and then they...
Yeah.
Because, yeah, they were they doing an experiment, and they were saying they were going off-world?
Yeah.
And it was all like a Truman Show sort of thing. Yeah.
I didn't get that far into it, but it was appearing that way, yeah. I think. And they were trying to lead it a bunch of different ways and make you guess what it was going to turn out to be.
But yeah, the brain drain, that's quite staggering, that figure.
Now,
because, like, this is linked up to the universities and the education system to identify talent.
Right. That's why they needed mass colleges.
Because there was that movie, like The Recruit, with
great movie. I love that. Colin Farrell. That was just one of the really kicked him off.
Al Pacino, and they developed the tech that takes over the TV screens, and then it's like, hang on, We got a live one here, Coming This, and it was like all about the trap, like recruitment.
Yep. And what the other one, Spy Game with what's his name?
Yeah, I love that.
Pitt. Yeah, I like that one too.
And the older guy, what's his name? In the Porsche. Oh man.
Redford. Yeah.
I see the face, you know.
Robert Redford.
Operation Dinner Out.
Yeah, I love that. I remember that, Dinner Out.
And he's on the helicopter getting out of like the prison, and he finds out the name of the
yeah. What was the name of the?
What's the name of the operation? Operation Dinner Out.
That's cool.
Well, I love the Robert Redford character in that. He's just so many steps ahead of everyone else. You know.
I liked him in the movie Sneakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they really weren't able to recreate a movie like that afterwards, because it started a new look at that genre.
Yeah. I think that was the very first time I ever heard of the NSA.
Yeah, because they had just been announced in the world at that time.
Yeah.
So in Sicario, after watching that again, I went and watched. It was The Infiltrator.
You talking recent?
Yeah, recent. Yeah, a movie that just came out.
Yeah.
And it was all about the Pablo Escobar era and all of the cash that was moving in and out of these banks.
Yeah.
And that's what unveiled, the Iran-Contra scandal.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I've actually had a real fascination about that era.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. What
am I triggering Galactic Boy?
Yes, because I have had my own fascination with that era.
Oh,
because I had shit out of like bases, like myself and dozens of other kids would just show up in an energy form and wreak havoc to computers, type shit out on screen, set stuff on fire. Yeah, scare people.
Yeah,
it's like a whole future attack.
Beg your pardon?
It was like a whole future attack. Like I'd have straight up dreams about that, like every night.
Wow.
Like thousands of kids worldwide. One time's in Japan, one's here, one are off world. You just pow pow, just taking systems out. Whenever they were trying to do something that was nasty.
Because, to me, like, I've mentioned a guy, Daniel Hopsicker, and he's like, he got triggered to explore the drug theme and how, the relationship between drugs and arms sales is hand in hand. But he's like in America, and it's like the whole concept of, mastering that genre in the world is just not even computed by Americans. It's all these outsiders, But
right.
you look at history, like he talks about, the idea that drug barons, whatever, are like these bare-chested, bent-leer wearing guys. They're all the guys with university buildings in Harvard. The family lineage. The whole.
Yeah, the lineage.
Yeah, that's where I really got into the drug thing with the money, because it's like hand in hand. It was like in Hong Kong and stuff. That's why I was fascinated with Kathy and that, because I'm here in Adelaide, and it's like very much a British bastion, and I remember like the whole perception that China getting back Hong Kong is such a negative thing. It was planted in our awareness that how dare China take back a part of the British Empire, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's like 50 years late, and the reason the British got Hong Kong is that they destroyed by opium the whole you know, reality. And it's like, you know, how dare we, you know, more than how dare they. But yeah, the Iran-Contra was just like, Daniel Hopsiker talks about, he's got this NSA associate that while he was in all that, he didn't agree with it, but it's like you have to go along with it. And it's like, he talks about how drugs became the tail that wags the dog in that whole reality. And
so
the money, I mean, the money is obviously going to these off-world stuff, you know, that's my attitude. So
think about the relevance of why drugs and a brain drain would be going on at the same time. Try to think of some correlations. And think multidimensionally here.
Well, it's to fund these people, like give them lifestyle, harvest energy, and
powering sacred geometry systems.
Yeah, like it's a bit like how you said, you know, there's these areas of energy reserve around the world that are harvested, and obviously done under you know, underground sort of tech and, you know, out of phase sort of things that require a lot of energy.
Well, that 60s, 70s, and 80s would have marked the end of the wizards era and the beginning of the tech era. Wizards would still exist, but not in the mass scales like they had done in the previous 300 years.
Yeah, so this is that, you know, that...
They had reduced them because the sacred geometry system used to be all the, wherever there was a post office, there was a black pole that was directly connected to the Pope that made all the religious symbols connect to each other. That's how he got dominion over the whole world, through the post system.
Yeah.
So that's why the British Opium Wars were so important, because they needed to put posts all throughout China.
Stamp their mark on the reality, yeah.
And use the stamp that was on the heroin or whatever, the opium or whatever it was at that time, to put the spiritual mark on the person too.
Yeah.
Your own.
Sacred geometry, like
person.
branding.
Yep. Branding.
Metaphysical level, absolutely.
Yep. So the end of...
Like, my attitude is like all these symbols say, like the military and the government agencies, like whether it be police or whatever, they all have symbols on them, so they're a stamp in the energy field by the unaware aspects that most people are set up for failure, which makes them conducive for being an instrument of that mechanism, of that.
Exactly, you smart man.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like, because
there's another little.
They can be Agent Smith at any time.
Yep. That's right.
And energy can come in and be invited as an overlay that takes over them, and they're not aware because they're not trained in the metaphysical sort of psychic defense. You know?
Perfect.
Yeah, I totally get that, because stuff has happened around me, and I talk about my peripheries, like a metaphor for all these peripheries are like, whether it be incarnation war or this stuff, it's like, I use the analogy of, I mentioned it to you before, the Aliens movie, where they get the crap beaten out of them for the first go, the Marines, and then they regroup trying to get the spaceship down at this other base, and they defend it, and they forget about the air vents, and it's like, that's like multi-dimensional peripheries, because in their 3D awareness, they think we've got the doors, we've got all the gates and stuff, but the aliens are very smart, and they come through the air vents, and it's like, what the crap is going on? And they realise how much they left a gap. So that's like a periphery I sort of contemplate. That movie offers it very visually, and you leave yourself wide open if you don't master all the peripheries. You know.
So the wizard class in the late 1800s, after the Civil War, because the Civil War was a test of black magic at very, very high levels. The group that lost, they were eradicated. So What was left of them basically became the drug cartels in Mexico, in Brazil, etc. They went into the hills to hide. So the wizard class was allowed to get very old. World War I came and World War II came. That thinned out a tremendous amount of the wizard class. By the 60s,
the middle management, Carl, that you sort of said, yeah.
So by the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they were so old, the old sacred geometry system could no longer be maintained, and digital systems and telephones and all that took over the new digital magic. And they allowed those people to die off, or to become part of a new militarized system of magic.
Yeah. But yeah, there was an appreciation on a different level that it was going to end anyway, so there had to be an alternative set up, a backup to maintain it, in alignment with the industrial sort of era.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole concept, the reality concept was changing on many levels. So
now back to Carl Sagan. He was in the center of the brain drain. What do you think he actually knew? Personal opinion.
I think he knew a lot, but he was probably compartmentalized as well, for enough to get his ego sort of going.
So do you think he had, like, knowledge that there were teleporters and thousands of species, or just a handful?
He was probably off there enough to be aware of certain things to keep him in tow. So when he went out on the public and was an instrument, it would be along the lines of that, the theme of the time that was wanted.
I agree. It was scripted, and he didn't write most of his scripts, though he approved all of them and gave them themes and stuff, because they were all his students.
Yeah. But probably not much, basically. He wasn't told much.
I believe he was. I believe he knew at that era that the moon had living beings on it, beings of light and physical manifest beings, and knew that the moon itself was hollow and 90% sure it was a spaceship, as well as Phobos was a vessel also. Clearly, he knew what would have gone on in Viking, and he would have known what would have been the pyramids on Mars. Absolutely. His ego would have demanded, and he would have known when he wasn't getting told the truth.
I know. Yeah.
He may look like
I mean, like, he was involved in many of the NASA sort of projects, you know, like from a core sort of directional sort of aspect of where they were going.
Mm-hmm. So he sat in on a lot of shit.
And he had a lot of imprint, obviously, codes and stuff.
Well, more than that, but I'm sure science came to him like it did to any scientist in that era when they were trying to do DARPA, you know, before it was DARPA.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, there were, at that time, so many things supporting the military-industrial stream. All you needed was a perfect, you know, black operation to build something or to research a technology totally compartmentalized. Thousands of engineers were abused like that.
Yeah.
And they made a lot of money, too.
So he had his hand in a lot of those sort of pies.
Yeah.
You know, it was good that you asked me that because what I would do is probably go and look at Wiki and just get a feel of it, and I would have I see all the names and stuff and what he's been involved in. But without doing that, it was like, yeah, my perception in the moment, it was a good test.
Yeah. His ego would demand it, and again, he would know. I mean, at that time, a lot of shit leaked out back then.
No doubt. And it's like he was like a bucking bull, a bucking like horse that they wanted to keep in his pen. You know, like we're going to have to give him some aspects to keep him on stream. You know.
Probably threw all the women at him. Made it worse.
Yeah. But you
I think
you mentioned Arthur C. Clarke, and it was like, I know he did like a series like Cosmos around that time, which I've got but I haven't watched. So it's like Arthur might be an interesting person to explore a bit thoroughly. You know, there's a really cool movie called Arrival coming out soon. It's meant to be a real challenge of the ET interaction meme. I think it's based on Arthur C. Clarke. It's like